not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, Friday Java, the 29th of June edition, the last Friday Java for this month. We've rolled through June, and as we move past June to the 7th month of the year, we are knocking down the 12-month clock, so to speak. We have from the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, of course, we always honor Heber Heyer, who was killed by white supremacists there in Charlottesville. In fact, the person that is charged is now charged with a federal hate crime. It's about time that occurred, and we also give our condolences to the people in Annapolis, Maryland, that died in their newsroom, a tragedy there by someone that had a vendetta, a long-running vendetta, evidently against the newspaper. And it appears that the people that were killed and wounded were not the people involved in his vendetta. He went back to 2011. We'll get to it in a minute here on it. But we'll start out with Anthony Kennedy. H erupted yesterday, and evidently she showed her true feelings of Anthony Kennedy. But Anthony Kennedy was a true conservative. He was appointed by Ronald Reagan in 1988. Now, in the last term, he voted 75% with the conservative majority. Now, there were some key cases here that, such as the same-sex marriage case, he wrote the majority opinion. That was in Obergefell versus Hodges. And let's see what else. With the liberal majority in to overturn, I see, the Obviously voted with conservative majority. Anyway, this is to overturn D.C.'s gun ban. Excuse me. In D.C. versus Heller. And this is a little graphic here. It was appointed by Ronald Reagan, and basically how he voted. We look at how he voted here since 1988. He voted with the, well, we already talked about that. That was in 2017, 2018. Wrote the majority opinion. We already talked about the same-sex marriage. Overturned D.C.'s gun ban. And I'm not sure why we're being shown this graphic. Anyway, he sided with the conservative majority in a number of important cases, upholding the travel ban, striking down California's law that required pregnancy centers to tell women about abortions available. These are these phony pregnancy centers that crop up. And the online sales tax, let's see, he voted. That was also a 5-4 there, and he voted for it. Digital privacy was a 5-4. That was a loss for. This is where police must obtain a search warrant there. And he was one of 4 that didn't vote for it. The abortion bill, the pregnancy centers, he voted with the majority there. And, of course, the trade union bill, that was another 5-4 vote. Registration vote removal, that was in Ohio. They call it cleansing. He voted with the conservatives on it. Sports betting, 6-3 a loss there. Let's see, where was he? Federal law that forbids states from authorizing and betting on college and professional sports violates a state's rights. Okay. Labor arbitration may require workers to settle employment disputes through individual arbitration. A very bad precedent there. Voted for the Trump administration there. His 5-4 vote there. Religious and gay rights was a 7-2 vote, and he was with it. The court ruled, oh, that was a Baker. That was a confused case. But nonetheless, he had been the deciding vote for years. Kennedy was a justice who most often in the majority of his final year, Roberts took him as the court's most influential member. He's about 85, and he was 88% of it. Just look at some graphics here. Sounded defeated in some of his final terms of work at Supreme Court. Critics note his concurrence on decision to uphold the travel ban. He wrote there are numerous instances in which the statements and actions of government officials are not subject to judicial scrutiny or intervention. That doesn't mean these officials are free to disregard the Constitution and the rights it proclaims and protects. Very interesting situation there with Anthony Kennedy. Well, Anthony Kennedy had a storied career, and he ended it basically as he started out. Period. So now he will be a forgotten justice, and a new trail will be written on the Supreme Court. And the Republicans are working overtime as quickly as possible to come up with a nominee that can be confirmed by the Senate. And there are several of those out there. There are Democrats also in very vulnerable states, i.e. North Dakota, Indiana, 2 that come off of the, and perhaps West Virginia. I don't know how Senator Meacham would vote. It would depend there. But generally speaking, let's jump on the bandwagon situation in most cases. Branch Lincoln comes to mind there. She was senator from Arkansas, but it was generally speaking a middle-of-the-road type Democrat, and her middle-of-the-roadness did not help her. She was defeated for re-election there in Arkansas. I guess she's a lobbyist now, but I'm not certain what she is. But that serves as more or less the way the wind many times can blow. In North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp has to run on her record. What the endorsement of DJ Trump will do there, well, we'll see. If the maximum of Thomas P. Tip O'Neill, former Speaker of the House and from the Commonwealth, nonetheless, are all politics local or politicians local? Well, we'll see. Terry Stanford lost his seat. Of course, the lady is now in a hospital, but nonetheless, by about, 2 percentage points in South Carolina. Now, I'm not certain if it would be that close in North Dakota. North Dakota is a very interesting state. They've had some Democratic representatives, but not as many as South Dakota. South Dakota, of course, had George McGovern and Tom Daschle and various other progressives that have represented. Alvarez becomes to mind there, that represented the state of South Dakota as opposed to North Dakota. But North Dakota comes from a progressive background. They still have their state bank there in North Dakota. One of the only states actually has a state bank. Some people have looked at it as that, but in North Dakota, it's just seen as an institution that does not compete with commercial lending, does lending primarily to farmers and to students, etc. But we'll see how those pan out, and we'll be watching the polling very, very closely. On this journalism situation, the Fox News evidently checked out the newspaper there in Ann Arbor, in Annapolis, Maryland, to see if it had a political slant. Evidently it did not. It was just a quote-unquote community newspaper, and from the looks at the reporters that were killed, they were just community-type reporters, nothing special there. Their pictures are here. Gerald Fishman, a clever and quirky voice of the community newspaper, he was killed. And another one killed was Rob Heitzen, a joyful style, a generous mentor, an older person there, and a sports writer named John McNamara. And also Roberta Smith, recently hired, loved spending time with her family, a younger person there, and a profile writer named Wendy Winters. And there were some people also wounded. Gerard Ramos evidently was the person that had a long-standing feud. Now, some were saying that the words of Maxine Waters fermented some of this. Very, very doubtful at all. That was overstability. If you recall from the president himself, calling the newspapers liars, Lopenpresse, that's the German for dirty newspapers, etc. That came from the highest office in the land. It doesn't have anything to do there. And there are people out here that are very, very influenceable, let's just say that. People that, and we don't know the case of Mr. Ramos, whether or not he was influenced by any other party than himself, we don't know. From what they said, he had a Twitter account, but he had not been there very much for years, and he had a few words to say. But again, it's too early to ascertain what happened. Our coverage here, of course, in the Baltimore Sun, we'd been using that the Baltimore Sun, that is, to cover the primary victory of Ben Jealous. And I mean, it's a very bad situation in Maryland, in that state capital, and also we have the Naval Academy at Indianapolis there. And there's also a little article here. We'll get it. We're not in the bleed and lead business. Fatal shooting of 5 at the Capitol Gazette is a rare attack on a U.S. journalist. In some other countries, there are many, many of these. Only 2 incidents since 1992, which more than one journalist has been killed. Happened in 2015. 2 television reporters were fatally shot during a live broadcast. I don't remember that one. Sources identified, well, we already went through that. He's from Laurel, Maryland. Violence against reporters and editors is rare in the U.S., especially compared into other nations. Press freedom groups have been warned in recent years of mounting hostility and threats to journalists. And yes, there are threats to journalists in many countries, particularly countries that have paramilitaries. In the Russian Federation, we've had that situation also happening. This is in Virginia, where the news people were killed. A newspaper reporter was killed in Oakland, California. Always reporting of financial. Oh, I remember that, the bakery there. Chauncey Bailey was the editor of several weekly newspapers. Remember Chauncey Bailey? Robert Stevens, photographic editor at the tabloid The Sun in Boca Raton, Florida, was killed. Oh, yeah, remember him, by anthrax. That's what killed him. The FBI believed that Bruce Ivins, a researcher, but they've never really pinned that one down, who sent out the anthrax. That was back a while. But anyway, it was put in the article here. Committee to Protect Journalists, founded between 1976 and 1993. 12 reporters have been killed in the United States. Most immigrants working in languages other than English. Local outlets in Baltimore have also been the scene of violence in recent years. So it's becoming more of an epidemic, not unusual there. The Fox News people, and also threats on our own Maxine Waters. We basically knew this would happen. This is from CNN. One serious death threat from an individual in Texas. She was planning to speak in Texas and Alabama. Those appearances have been canceled. Saturday morning at the annual legislative conference of the National Black Elected Legislative Women in Birmingham, Alabama. The organization's president, Karen Cripter, told the told the AP Waters had canceled for security reasons. We don't know all of them now, but they have identified a person. According to CNN, Roberts said in a statement, Capitol Police are investigating several other threats in which people have vowed to shoot, lynch, cause me serious bodily harm. No doubt. On his radio show, this is Sean Hannity, appeared to suggest that Waters was partially responsible for the shooting. I've been saying now for days that something horrible was going to happen because of the rhetoric. Well, the rhetoric was out there way before Maxine got out there. With all this rhetoric against the press, one has to understand that there are right-wing groups in the country that are determined to destroy the press. Now, we're not talking about the free press, we're talking about the press and anyone that speaks in opposition to their little quote-unquote precious values, period, whether it be religion, etc. And there are many, many people out there that have mental issues, mental health issues that can be used in the service of these right-wing outfits. and they're easily convinced to go out and harm someone. That has happened over and over again. Of course, we have the patsies like Sirhan out there, and various other patsies, Lee Harvey Oswald, you name a bunch of patsies, although he did not have mental health issues. A different situation there. And he's doubtful if Sirhan did. As a jockey, they said he got kicked in the head, but we sort of doubt that. There was more than one shooter in that auditorium that night, no doubt. He was there, but did what he hit and what he didn't hit. He evidently did not hit Robert Kennedy. But this is something that's been on the surface of the American body politic in many places. They just call it the assassination, the political assassination of people. And many times people that are threatened are confronted by these right-wing operators or people on the margin. No, we're not talking about... Maxine Waters obviously different. She's a national spokesman, nationally known. But some of these people are sort of like the people in the newsrooms at the Gazette in Annapolis. They were not well known. Maybe their byline in that paper, they were not nationally known, and as far as we know, didn't write on any controversial matters. I didn't know it. When you're sports reporters, not political reporters. This fellow just came into the newsroom, and what was in the newsroom, he captured. And this basically, that story is pretty easy to sum up. And the Washington Post... they were under attack. They showed a building here, a nice modern building the Gazette had, and they were also reporting on Twitter what was going on there. Some guy that was a court and crime reporter tweeted a further detail after being evacuated from the building. So, Paul Davies, gunman shot through the glass door, etc. And these are just some of the tweets that are coming out. I'm safe and was not there. This is another reporter. So there were various reporters reporting, is what reporters quickly do. Nonetheless, Quickie collapsed into blame and division. This is the shooting already of 888 Bestgate. Please help us. Oh, I see. Anyway, happened in the afternoon about 2:45, and 5 of colleagues dead, 2 others wounded. And the editor there felt compelled to defend the work of his colleagues. And he literally had to ask people on Twitter not to be asking for interviews, etc. And I mean, it gets to the point that there is no point in it. And this is part of the problem here with Hannity and these people stirring up this type of behavior, which in itself is unfortunate. Many people out here have been targeted by right-wingers, and one of the things, and very few, incidentally, left-wingers, other than, say, not serving someone dinner or whatever, these little what I call child's play type operations. Not that I'm disparaging anyone's particular political statements that they make, but is a little different from not giving someone a meal, affording them a meal, or whatever else, going to their house and loudly protesting, than going there and threatening them. Particularly if the threat comes from some individual that is dispatched there by some organization or a group of people. That in itself is intolerable. And it does, in fact, happen. Particularly people are under the influence of these cult-like organizations, religious organizations, that they can become extremely vulnerable. There's no doubt about that. Let's get to the University of Virginia. This particular piece was written by none other. Part of it was written by Larry Sabato. The uncertain political ramifications of Justice Kennedy's exit. Larry Sabato, Klondike, and Jeffrey Skelly. That's for the Crystal Ball on the 28th of June. After turbulent national political and already turbulent, national political environment was rocked by another major development Wednesday, the retirement of Anthony Kennedy. DJ Trump was already got to a point one Gorsuch there to fill Anton Scalia. I hadn't thought about him in a long time. Now there's a second justice out there for jurisprudence standpoint. This is a nightmare for the left. Trump seemed to pick a Gorsuch-style conservative for the seat, and Republicans have been building a judicial farm team for years, no doubt about that, in the disappointments they suffered in the Reagan and the first President George H.W. Bush's years, when Republican High Court selections sometimes did not turn to be out as conservative as they should have. And they speak there. Anyway, we think of Justice Souter. McConnell, who is seen pushing the judiciary to the right as a top priority while Trump is president and the GOP controls the Senate. Any Democrat who votes for his new nominee will anger a certain percentage of Democrats in very red states. These Democratic voters may choose not to show up at the polls or may stop donating money to express their displeasure. Even if the red state Democrats vote against Trump's pick, they might energize more Republican presidential voters to turn out. McConnell knows all this. He doesn't care that much how Democratic senators end up voting on the justice nominee, so long as he can keep his own caucus together, assuming the vote before the midterm election. They'd like to do that because they don't know what the midterm elections has in store for them. Republicans' strength in the Senate is fragile because John McCain, of course, is absent and due to poor health. The functions on a 50 to 49. Republicans will now have any senator to object to the nominee. Susan Collins of Maine, Bob Corker of Tennessee, and Fluke of Arizona, and Lisa Murkowski out in Alaska. Rand Paul of Kentucky come to mind. It would depend on the nominee there. These people are usually fairly, not necessarily John McCain because he won't be there, but these other characters are fairly. Susan Collins, who just got reelected, she doesn't have to worry about being defeated up in Maine. Bob Corker, he's leaving. He can do whatever he wants to do. And so is Fluke also. But sometimes those people even fall in line with these characters on questions of this nature. So we won't count on them. Political questions unanswerable now abound. When will the vote be scheduled? Before or after the midterm? Probably before, but maybe not if the new justice is concerned before the midterm. If only justice turns on the left, because the right would be satisfied and the left outraged. Already rank and file Democrats are tweeting that the most important midterm in their lifetime. I would agree there. I'm not sure if it's the most important one in their lifetime. They've said that about many midterms. The enthusiastic bump could be larger if the vote was a near election or afterwards. Then again, this is a too much a news era with something else fades from the public memory in a week or two, sometime a day or two, I would add. Thus, the vacancy seems very likely to help Republicans cement a conservative majority on the Supreme Court for years. I'm not sure about for decades, but they could pick up another seat. There will, of course, be argument as to whether a decision by McConnell and the Senate Republicans to stonewall 9 months, Obama's choice of, again, Merrick Garland, that the Senate should have waited 6 months until 2019 to consider the new vacancy. Partisans will argue about the process and the hypocrisy as much to keep the other side accountable. But ultimately, the judicial nominee game has become one of pure and raw politics, no doubt about that. It always was pure and raw politics in most instances. Senate Republicans who held the majority in 2010 had no formal legal obligation to confirm an Obama nominee, and they did not. They played power politics on the last vacancy and won. They can and almost assuredly will do the same this time around. When the tables are turned politically, there is a future Supreme Court vacancy. We should expect Democrats to do the same. But again, the notorious B.I.G. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is in her 80s, and someone could die unexpectedly, as what happened with Anton Scalia. The conservatives will rule the roost on the court. Don't be surprised if there's an effort to expand the court. Well, expansion of the court now, Roosevelt tried it and didn't work out. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But this will not happen until the Democrats control both houses of Congress, which is a tenuous thought to begin with. I won't say it's an ambiguous thought. But the Senate is much more difficult because of those vulnerable senators. But this is always a problem with the middle-of-the-road Democrats. We mentioned Branch Lincoln. Well, we're better off without Branch Lincoln. She wasn't much of a Democrat to begin with. And some of the others there, but we forgot to talk about Claire McCaskill. So, see, we've got quite a few people that she's been doing okay in the polls so far. And then, of course, we got a senator down in Florida, Nelson, running against Scott in Florida. So let me finish this up here. The modern procedural at arms race over judicial nominee norms, which one can trace all the way back to the Senate Democratic successful defeat of Robert Bork. Well, yeah, ultimately Kennedy got Bork's seat, but I suppose old Kennedy in his last term decided he'd be somewhat of a Bork. There will be another vicious fight at a time when the nation is deeply divided, partisan, polarized, etc. Remember in Robert Bork, the nation was not as polarized. Yes, Bork was borked, but the nation was not as polarized as it is today. Part of the reason for that is the very tenuous nature of the Trump election. 80,000 votes, 23,000 in Wisconsin out of millions, and it was a very tenuous vote based upon a number of things. Voter suppression being a number one, and a number two, the mistreatment of Bernie Sanders, and the Sanders supporters either stayed home or went out and voted for Jill Stein. And three, the political malpractice of Hillary the Monster Clinton in those states she should have been paying much closer attention to. Those are some of the things. On the week that was, as tomorrow night, we'll go over some of the polling, and we'll spend some time on it. Let's just finish up with the College World Series. Oregon State claims the College World Series with a 5-0 victory over Arkansas. You remember Arkansas won the first game. Oregon State came back last night and won that game, and this game was all Oregon State. Period. That was at Ameritrades Park in Omaha, Nebraska. So this is Abel. He threw 129 pitches Thursday. Told ESPN after the game he wasn't sure how he went the distance. That's a long ways there, especially for a fella in a college. The other team to do it, again, was back to Oregon State. Oregon State's in a perfect position to do it, period. And let's go to the FIFA Cup while we are here. I thought we had...
It's your turn, Craig, to do the World Cup predictor, as we are now, of course, at the bracket stage. You had Germany winning it all.
Well, first half wasn't very good.
Well, no, indeed. You said the bar low. Let's start with Uruguay, Portugal.
I'm going to go Uruguay, 2 match winners against 1, Cavani and Suarez.
France, Argentina.
Argentina, I don't see the shambles improving, and I think the French will be too strong for them.
And what about Brazil, Mexico?
Again, favourites to win now.
7 hooks to come home.
Sharpish.
Belgium, Japan.
Belgium.
Belgium. Okay, let's take it to the other side. Spain, Russia.
Yep, hosts are going to go
out. Croatia, Denmark.
Too strong for Denmark.
Sweden, Switzerland.
I'm going to go Sweden, although I think Switzerland have got more talented players. I think they're better organised. This one's killing me.
Because you want to see.
Anyway, that's so much for those predictions there. On a Saturday, well, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll go back to, let's see what we want here. Friday night, obviously. The Friday games there had France and, oops, this is Saturday games. Sorry about that. I need to go to Friday night. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. What am I doing here? Anyway, let's see what we got going here. Senegal and Colombia. Colombia 1-0 on Senegal, and Poland 1-0 there, and England and Belgium. Belgium 1-0 over England, and Panama and Tunisia. Tunisia won that game 1-2, and Japan actually. Poland beat Japan, and later. That was Thursday. Let's see, get Friday in here. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. Not sure what we're doing here, but anyway, there's France and Argentina and Uruguay and Portugal. The 2 games. According to this, we won't muck around anymore with it. We were getting some of the results there and see where we go. And let's see. We'll look at the group standings here real quickly while we have time to look at it. Uruguay is ahead of Russia. And then we have Saudi Arabia. That's in the A group. In the B group, Spain, Portugal, and Iran. And how did Mexico get down here? Not certain. Oh, okay. And the C group, France and Denmark. And then we have Croatia and Argentina. And Croatia has 3 wins. Argentina has 1 win. Oh, yeah, I see. I have to look at this a little bit here. Uruguay has 3 wins also, and Spain has 3 wins. Portugal has 3 wins, and Iran. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. 1 wins. Let me get over to the wins here. What am I doing? Looking at the wrong column. Anyway, France has 2 wins, and Denmark has 1 and 1, so forth and so on. Croatia has 3 wins, and Argentina 1. Yeah. And then we go to Brazil. They're in Group E. They're on top, and Switzerland is the next one in Group F. That's Sweden. They were talking about that. And then Mexico. They both have 2 wins, and Belgium and England. And Belgium has 2 wins. England has 2. And finally, Colombia has 2 wins. Japan, Senegal, and all the rest have 1 win apiece. All right. Let's do Major League Baseball, something we know. The Diamondbacks were in Florida. D-backs shut out the Marlins 4-0. The Athletics were in the Motor City. Athletics 4-2. And in 13 on the south side of Chicago, the Twins pulled them out 2-1. And in 10, the Mariners were again in Camden Yards. 4-2 was the score. Mariners of Seattle. The Cubbies finally came alive in Los Angeles tonight, or today actually. 11-5 was the score. 11-5 over the Dodgers. The line score there: the Cubbies had 15 hits, and the Dodgers had 9 hits, 1 error. The Rockies and Giants in San Francisco was a slugfest there. The Rockies came out 9-8. They had 14 hits, 1 error, and the Giants had 12 hits and 1 error. What a day. Wade Davis got the win. The Angels were in Fenway Park. Red Sox 4-2. The Nationals were in Philly. Philly 4-3 there. Nationals have been slumping lately. The Brewers and Reds in Cincy. It was Brewers 6-4. And finally, the Astros and Rays in Florida. 1-0 or 1-0. Astros over the Rays. That is a baseball. And I think, running a little late here. We'll get to the scores. We'll get to the polls very quickly, at least the latest poll. There wasn't a whole lot of polling out there, but we do have a poll out of Salt Lake City. Has Mia Love up by 6 there. And then we had a slew of polls on Wednesday. This is on Thursday. On Wednesday, we had Casey ahead. This is Suffolk poll. And that was for Senate. And for Governor, Wolf is ahead by 13. Monmouth poll is out of Jersey. Sorelli is up by 4. Much closer race there. Harvard-Harris poll had old DJ Trump at 47. That's the highest he's been in any poll. And the Reuters poll at 46, 43 at the Economist YouGov. Rasmussen at 46, and Harvard-Harris, the generic ballot there, Democrats up by 4. And Reuters has the Democrats up by 3. And the Economist has them up by 5. Pretty close on generic poll there. And what else do we have going on? Well, we get to congressional. It's pathetic. Right direction, wrong direction, yeah. Wrong track said 54. 37 for the right track. These always come out Harvard-Harris at 38. Wrong track at 52. Usually get these moving along there. And I think we mentioned Scott. Actually, this poll, this is the NBC poll, has Nelson up by 4. Some other polls by various, who was it here? CBS had Scott up by 5. So dead even in Florida. This will do it for us. We'll see you on the week that was. We'll have a numbers man report out. Incidentally, the economy moves on. The revised GDP dropped to 2.0. There's some other mixed things in there. We're still in the Barack Obama economy, and as we phase into the DJ Trump economy, a lot of mixed signals. We still have unemployment at 3.8. Supposedly it will go down the year. Factor in tariffs, which is very inconsistent here. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about GDP, GDI, etc. And let's see where we are on Numbers Man. Our open source report, we will get it out this week as we move into the holiday. And looking ahead here, we do have a special for the 4th of July. We usually always have one. And we'll have one this year also, talking about the 4th and what it means to the American worker. That'll be an interesting one at best. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Saturday morning.